gentleman, Chairman Cole's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And to my friend, Mr. Hastings' point about Hastings Obamacare, it's my understanding they did consider that, but our colleague Doc Hastings really objected vehemently. So thought it might put his seat in jeopardy. So they backed off at the last minute. I have a question about the underlying legislation because it really gets to this concept of sign and then a couple of others. But just to refresh our memories, do either of you happen to know roughly what, let's say, young person in good health, early 20s, early 30s, whatever you want to say, no problems, what health care would cost that individual that we're now mandating have to get it, and two, what the fine is if they choose not to do that?
I'd be happy to answer that. And there have been different estimates, but to be a bit imprecise here, perhaps my good colleague from Washington will want to be more precise in this regard, but several $1,000s is what they can anticipate their cost being. The fine, $95 under this law upon implementation first year, which would be January 1 if, in fact, we don't pass the bill I'm here to represent today.
So, and if you disagree with that, Mr. McDermott, please,
If you're talking about the provisions of the law,
yeah,
the fine for an individual for the first year is $95, $285 for a family, up to 1% of their income, okay? In the second year, it's $325 for an individual, $975 for a family, and in the third year, it would be $695 and $2,085 for a family. So it's graduated in. It's sort of saying, okay, if you want to sit out a year and watch this, that's fine. Just pay your fine, and you can go on down the road with no health insurance. That's fine. But you're going to pay something. Everybody has a responsibility to pay. But we're going to raise the ante every year until you get the picture.
You laid out, rational decision-making earlier in your comments about, why wouldn't people just, not do the insurance and make I fail to see how this fine is going to encourage people to do this anyway. If the rational thing financially is to say, hey, I can show up at any time and get the insurance, why not just pay the fine?
Well, if you didn't make an individual mandate and require that people be in, you could never cost this out.
I'm just suggesting is the fine, and asking, I guess, not suggesting anything, but if people are going to behave, quote, rationally economically, which is what you suggested, it's still cheaper to pay the fine. It's still much cheaper to pay the fine. So why won't they do that? And why won't they do that indefinitely? Because even with the gradual increase at the family and individual level, it's still cheaper to pay the fine than it is to go buy the insurance. So we either have this fine too low, or
but one of the things you're old enough.
I'm very old
to know that there's a point where the wheels start falling off the wagon. Now, for young people, they think the wheels will never fall off. There are a lot of people in this room who can't imagine that they would ever have big health care bills. But somebody easily in this room could have leukemia. Now, they paid the $95. Then they go to the hospital, and it costs them, at the Hutch Cancer Center in Seattle, to get a bone marrow transplant, costs $125,000. They've paid $95. Who pays that $125,000? Well, they wind up with a bill from the Hutch Cancer Center to pay for that. Now, if they thought that $95 was a good bet, it'll turn out they weren't very smart. And there are lots of young people who are in motorcycle accidents and all kinds of accidents, skiing accidents. When my kid got out of college, he said he didn't want to have insurance. I said, Jimmy, you go up to Group Health and you're going to buy a policy. He said, I don't have the money. I said, I'll help you. Because one of these days when you're skiing and you come off a cornice and you drop 100 feet into the snow, you're going to break a leg and get a spiral fracture that's going to cost $50,000, and you think I'm going to pay for it. That doesn't make any sense. We're going to get you an insurance policy right off the top. Not everybody has a father who says that to their kid. So kids will make this bet, $95, hey, nothing. Give them the money, forget about it. But some of them are going to get clobbered.
No, I think you're right. I think some will get clobbered. Most of them will win the bet. You know, that's the problem, I think, with the system just in terms of its operation. I think most people, and I hope I'm wrong, and by the way, I think this is going to happen when companies are concerned too. It's still cheaper to pay the fine per worker than it is to provide full health care. Now, I'm not arguing for higher fines, but I think we're going to be confronted with the dilemma. I think companies are pretty quickly, I know of companies now that won't go above 50 because of that provision. I think other companies will try to figure out ways where maybe they can keep their existing workforce on but just pay the fines for new people and over time almost work themselves out of the insurance business. I think there's a lot of unforeseen consequences. And I think individuals that make, quote, rational economic decisions in many cases are going to decide not to participate in this program. Just pay the fine. It's just cheaper because you can always at the end of the day come in. So, but that doesn't really, you know, that's not a point that undermines the authority here. I want to ask you both another question. I'm very curious. My good friend from North Carolina sort of raised this issue. Do you think the President has the constitutional authority to waive parts of the law that he chooses to waive? And you each, I assume, have different opinions. I'd like to hear your rationale.
Absolutely. I don't know if you were in the room when I
was not, and I apologize. I arrived late.
U.S. Code 26 U.S. Code 7805 subsection A gives him general leave to give waivers when there are parts of the law that he thinks needs a waiver for a certain period of time. And that's what he used. He's not the only president who's used that. Bush used it. Clinton used it.
Did you agree with it when Bush used it?
What's that?
Did you agree with it when Bush used it?
Did I agree with it? I didn't know what happened, probably.
Well, I'd just be surprised.
I wasn't trying to tear up the law that Mr. Bush was using it for, but it was used in a tax law. And there are lots of times when we write a law, we think we've thought of everything. But the reason that section is in the law is because we're smart enough to know we haven't thought of everything, and the president's going to be stuck on the hook when we're not around here, and he's got to make it work. So we gave him the flexibility in that situation to do that, and that's what the president did here.
Let me ask that same question to Mr. Young. Do you think the president has the constitutional authority to,
Well, let me first start with a bit of humility here, right? I do have a law degree. I have practiced law. Fortunately, I was able to find an exit strategy from the practice of law. I ran for office. But
you may want to rethink that strategy.
Yeah, that's right. I'll tell you. But I'll say this: there are competing views out in the public domain with respect to this question. It's one that deserves very careful consideration and public debate. This was not debated publicly. We had a blog post posted by the administration making this, frankly, this incredible change. Now, my own instincts, my own thoughts with respect to the constitutionality of this is that the president has gone too far, that this is the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, is a comprehensive package. You can't have an individual mandate without the employer mandate, without the, all this stuff's supposed to work together because how are we going to know if someone is in fact eligible for an individual mandate subsidy if you don't have an employer mandate in place, for example? And there's no clause, to my knowledge, in this very large bill, comprehensive bill, dealing with 12% of our nation's economy and growing at a rapid rate. There's no clause that allows you to separate out particular pieces. So I think that in the interest of comity, in the interest of transparency, and in the interest of better lawmaking, this would have been better handled here in a public forum, which is why I think it's important that we as a Congress, we as a body sanction the delay of the employer mandate.
You actually lead me and anticipate actually my next question, which again I'd put to both of you, because I have to tell you, if I accepted that this was constitutional and wise, I would still have a very hard time with how it was done. I mean, to put this on a blog, to do it when the president's out of the country on a holiday weekend, when Congress, is clearly meant to deceive or diffuse political, attention. It is disrespectful to people that will have an opposite opinion. It's not worthy of an administration that considers itself transparent and open and, while, willing to listen to other points of view. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. But to do it this way and not think you were going to get a negative reaction and further erode confidence from your opponents, I just think that's a shabby way to behave. It's not worthy of the administration of the president to announce something of this magnitude with no, hey, we're considering this, we'd like to know what people think about this, let's be in town, just to drop it, on a time that was clearly meant to get the least possible news coverage and attention, put the opponents at the most possible disadvantage, and frankly be less than forthright with the American people. Look, if you really strongly believe we got to do this to make this work better, fair point. Argue it. Don't drop it out on a blog. Don't try and do it behind the backs of the American people. My guess is it made what was already an unpopular law that never has been popular, more unpopular. And it probably fed the cynicism and skepticism amongst the American people. Yeah, I mean, you're fair react to that if you want, but I mean, can anybody give me any other logical explanation as to why this law would have been changed or this announced this way at this time in this manner, other than to be less than forthright and honest?
I don't want to try and psychoanalyze the administration or the president in particular. And so I won't do that. With respect to motives, I'll leave that for others to judge. I do think that as an institution, as a body, in a bipartisan way, we ought to be concerned about our role as the legislative body of this country. I think there has to be some deference, some comity, some cooperation between the branches on something so important. And that's setting aside the very important legal reservations I have, and my own read of this, take it for what it's worth, is that legal bounds were also passed here that should not have been. So nonetheless, I think the underlying policy of delaying the employer mandate based on all the negative feedback the administration has received with respect to the mandate and the law more generally, I think it was the appropriate thing to do. So that's why I think we should go ahead and pass that bill. And I think, once again, in the interest of fairness, we need to afford the same sort of tax relief to individual, hardworking Americans that we give to big business, that the president has proposed we give to big business. And so it's my hope that on both sides of the aisle, we can come together on this issue that will be very popular among the American people.
Please. Yeah, we went on quite a while, so you certainly deserve a chance to respond.
Well, I would say the authorization says, except where such authority is expressly given by this title to any other person of officer or employee of the Treasury Department, the Secretary shall prescribe all needful rules and regulations. That's the authorization. That's where he gets the ability to write rules and regulations as he sees fit. There was a recent Fourth Circuit court last week in which the justice said that the employer mandate is no monster. He said it's not important to the fundamental functioning of this bill. That's why they took it out in the Massachusetts case. As I said earlier, they repealed it just the other day, and the Governor Patrick of Massachusetts signed it into law because it was going to be done in the federal one. He said, we don't need it up here. We're doing just fine. We didn't have anybody run away from their responsibility, their employees. So I might share a little of your concern about the way the announcement was made. But the president certainly had the authority to do it, and I think he executed it within the law.
My friend, as always, knows his facts and makes a good argument. And I appreciate, by the way, that you would have some concern I suspect privately, and look, I understand, I've been in difficult positions on the other side. I don't think anybody in this room would have advised the President of the United States to make this kind of announcement in this way. I mean, any competent practicing politician on either side would say, don't do it that way. Be honest. Hold a press conference. Say we got to do this to make the law work. Invite people to do. There may even be some appearance of unfairness here. Here's why I don't think it is unfair. Just do that. Don't drop it on July 3rd or whatever it was on a holiday weekend with Congress not in session, you not in town, and make it look like you're doing, I mean, you know, you look like you're trying to pull a fast one. And when you are trying to pull a fast one, it's sure better not to look like it. I mean, this mystifies me. I have to tell you that is political malpractice. Two quick questions. I've gone on very long. Chairman's been very generous. And I know you guys will have probably different answers to this. First, do you think this is popular with the American people? I'm not saying that's how we should necessarily judge everything we should do, but all the polling, both for the law and this decision, suggests to me that it's not, and that may be the explanation for why it was announced in the way it was. And second, and this gets to a point that Mr. Young made and that I agree with, you know, sometimes you got to just be fair or at least look like you're being fair. I think it looks incredibly unfair to let business off and individuals on. I just think it's actually going to erode, and I'm not for this law, don't want to suggest that my opinion would change, but I think it's going to erode the effort to build faith in. And that has not happened. My friend from Washington mentioned the prescription drug Medicare Part D program. And, you know, strangely enough, that's always been pretty popular. It certainly had some challenges, but actually at the beginning, it's always polled well. I can tell you as an old pollster, that's why Bush ran on it in 2000. His threat to us was if we didn't pass it, he was going to pass your version of it. It was popular. It stayed popular. When you got into power, you certainly haven't tried to repeal it or change it. It cost 41% less than the CBO estimated it would. We'll see if Obamacare does as well. I will yield, when I finish my point, I'll certainly yield to my friend. We'll see if this program costs 41% less than CBO says it does 10 years down the road. Now,
no, and the gentleman talked about popularity. I don't know about your constituents, but, you know, when I look at what has been accomplished already because of Obamacare, children no longer face discrimination due to pre-existing conditions. Students and young adults are gaining coverage through their parents' plan. Medicare is actually stronger, and the donut hole is being closed. Americans no longer face lifetime limits on care. Families are receiving rebates from insurance companies. Soon, being a woman will no longer be a pre-existing condition. I think all those things are pretty popular, at least amongst my constituents. I would assume amongst yours as well. So if we're talking about popularity here, I mean, let's appreciate what has been accomplished already.
Reclaiming my time, you know, if I serve you a meal of spinach, peas, turnips, onions, and dessert, ice cream, I guess the ice cream part would be pretty popular. But if you looked at the meal as a whole, it's not. And this thing has never been popular. I'm just telling you as a pollster, may be right, we'll see. You know, we're on this road. But it isn't popular. It's never been popular. And it's not, you know, there wouldn't be a Republican majority sitting up here if this thing was all that popular. Because we certainly weren't all that popular in 2009. You made us somehow popular by 2010. And my good friend, the chairman, who played an incredible role in all that. And my good friend, Mr. Young, who chose to run in part because of this bill. So my last question, with an opportunity to respond. I'm sorry. I missed it. I know it was good because you're laughing, man. But I mean, I just think it's not fair. I mean, and if we need, I can't imagine that the individual mandate is going to somehow be easier applying to millions of people to implement than the business mandate. And I think individuals are always harder to track and more difficult to deal with, and there's much more complexity in there. So if we need to delay part of it, and you know, it seems to me that we ought to just delay it all. I think people would actually accept that a lot easier than they're going to accept what's getting ready to happen. I think they're going to be awfully upset that somebody got off and the average American got stuck. But you're free to respond.
I hear that this is not a popular plan and that it's, and the polls show this, and that only 52% and all this kind of stuff. But I watched from 2010 onward a continual barrage against Obamacare. We've had 39 attempts. This will be the 38th attempt to repeal it. We've had all of that. We had hundreds of millions of dollars spent in the campaign about Obamacare, and the Republican candidate was against it, and his vice president was against it, and the people voted Barack Obama back in by a bigger majority than he got the first time.
Actually,
So you got to ask yourself, how unpopular is this program?
you know, I would yield to my friend always in his expertise, and even where we disagree, respect it. Something I know something about is presidential numbers. This is the first president in American history that got reelected with fewer votes, a lower percentage, and less electoral votes. So the idea that I think people vote on a variety of reasons. Not everybody voted on this, but he didn't pick up ground politically because of this. He just simply didn't, because he wasn't reelected with a larger majority. He was reelected with a smaller majority.
He didn't lose.
I think that's a very good point, and in politics that may be the Trump point, but he didn't reelect the House either, or bring a House with him. So we'll see. I mean, this is going to play out with us for a long. There's a difference between murder and suicide, so we can talk that in another context, another time. But my friend, Mr. Young.
Briefly here, if I might, with respect to the popularity of the law and the perception of the law, I believe that people would have a firmer sense of what the law is about had there been a public airing of all the issues, had this bill been compiled in a transparent way through the public hearing process and so on, and done in a more bipartisan way. That's my personal belief. But we do have numbers, not based on narrow aspects of the law. We've actually done polling, or others have, with respect to the law more generally. We know that 48% of businesses believe that Obamacare will be bad for business. We know that a third of American families believe that Obamacare will make their family worse off. We know that the individual mandate is only favored by 12% of the American people. We know these things. And I think it was the feedback that the administration was receiving from the well-organized business community as these numbers started coming in about the number of people who are going to lose their insurance and the average monthly cost increases. So the business community spoke up. And the administration responded to that. We offer a bill here today to sanction in what I regard as a more appropriate and legal way, sanction that action. And we also offer a companion piece of legislation that will afford the same sort of tax relief to individual American families that the President, that this administration has proposed offering to big business.
Well, I thank both the gentlemen. I thank the chairman for being exceptionally gracious on the time, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back some. I appreciate